The morning sun cast long shadows across the streets of Lagos as the funeral procession wound its way through Victoria Island. Black Mercedes-Benzes moved in a solemn line, their windows tinted dark as midnight. Inside the lead car lay an ornate mahogany casket, hand-carved with intricate patterns that spoke of wealth and status. The woman inside was Amara Okonkwo, one of Nigeria's most successful businesswomen, declared dead at the age of 45. Or so everyone thought. The procession was heading toward the Cathedral Church of Christ, where Lagos's elite had gathered to pay their respects. Amara had been a force of nature in life, the CEO of Okonkwo Industries, a conglomerate that spanned real estate, technology, and manufacturing. She had built her empire from nothing, rising from a small village in Enugu State to become one of Africa's most powerful women. Her sudden death from what doctors called acute cardiac failure had sent shockwaves through Nigeria's business community. Among the mourners were government officials, fellow business moguls, and celebrities. Her younger brother, Chike, had organized everything with military precision. The funeral was to be the grandest Lagos had ever seen, befitting a woman of Amara's stature. No expense had been spared, from the gold-trimmed programs to the live orchestra waiting inside the cathedral. As the procession approached the church steps, where a red carpet had been rolled out and hundreds of mourners stood in their finest black attire, something unexpected happened. A man burst through the crowd. He was thin, almost skeletal, with matted gray hair and clothes that hung from his frame like rags on a scarecrow. His bare feet slapped against the pavement as he ran toward the hearse. Security guards immediately moved to intercept him, but he was surprisingly quick for someone who looked like he hadn't eaten in days. "Stop! Stop the funeral!" he shouted in Igbo, then switching to English. "She's not dead. The woman in that box is not dead." The crowd gasped. Some people stepped back in alarm. Others murmured about the audacity of this homeless man disrupting such a solemn occasion. The security guards grabbed him, but he fought with desperate strength. "Please, you must listen to me." His voice cracked with urgency. "I am Dr. Obinna Nwachukwu. I know everyone thinks I'm just a madman on the streets, but I was once a doctor. Please, you must check her. She's in a coma, not dead. I've seen this before." Chike Okonkwo stormed down the church steps, his face twisted with rage. He was a large man, well-fed and prosperous, dressed in an expensive black suit with gold cufflinks that caught the morning light. "Remove this lunatic immediately," he commanded. "How dare you disrespect my sister's memory with your insane ravings?" But the homeless man, Dr. Nwachukwu, as he claimed, would not be silenced. "Please, I beg you in the name of God, just check her pulse properly. Check her eyes. I saw them load the casket into the hearse an hour ago when I was sleeping in the alley behind the funeral home. The casket moved. I saw it move from inside." "You saw nothing but your own delusions," Chike snapped. "My sister was examined by the best doctors in Lagos. She is dead. Take him away." But something in the homeless man's eyes gave a few people pause. Despite his appearance, he spoke with the clarity and conviction of an educated man. And there was something else, a desperation that seemed rooted not in madness, but in genuine concern. An elderly woman in the crowd, Mama Adis, one of the church's respected elders, stepped forward. She had known Amara since she was a young woman starting her business. "Wait," she said, her voice carrying weight. "Let him speak. What harm is there in checking?" Chike's face reddened. "Mama Adis, with all due respect, this is absurd. My sister has been dead for 3 days. We cannot desecrate her body based on the ravings of a street person." 3 days? Dr. Nwachukwu's eyes widened. "Then there's still time. Please, I'm begging you. I know how this looks. I know what I've become." His voice broke. "But I was trained at University College Hospital in Ibadan. I was a neurologist before everything fell apart. I've seen cases of catalepsy, a condition that mimics death. The person's heartbeat becomes so slow, it's almost undetectable. Their breathing becomes shallow. They appear dead, but they're not," the crowd murmured. Some people were pulling out their phones, recording the scene. This was already becoming the kind of scandal that would dominate social media for weeks. A younger man in the crowd, wearing a priest's collar, stepped forward. Father Benedict had been scheduled to perform the funeral service. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should at least verify. If If this man is wrong, we proceed with the funeral and deal with him appropriately. But if there's even the smallest chance he's right..." He left the sentence hanging. Chaik looked around at the crowd, realizing he was losing control of the situation. His jaw clenched. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "But when this proves to be nothing but the fantasies of a deranged mind, I will press charges for disturbing the peace and desecrating a funeral." The hearse was opened. The casket was carefully removed and placed on a stand that had been set up for viewing inside the church. Several doctors who had been among the mourners were called forward. Dr. Nwachukwu, still held by security guards but no longer fighting, watched with intense focus. Dr. Adeyemi, the Okonkwo family physician who had pronounced Amara dead, approached with obvious reluctance. He had staked his reputation on his diagnosis. He opened the casket. Amara lay inside, dressed in white lace, her hands folded across her chest. Her skin had the waxy pallor of death. Her lips were slightly parted, her eyes closed. To everyone watching, she looked every bit the deceased woman she was supposed to be. Dr. Adeyemi checked her pulse at the wrist. Nothing. He checked her neck. Nothing. He turned to the crowd with a triumphant look. "As I stated in my official report, this woman is..." "Check her eyes." Dr. Nwachukwu interrupted. "Look for the corneal reflex. And please, use a proper stethoscope, not just your fingers. Her heartbeat could be as slow as 1 or 2 beats per minute." Dr. Adeyemi bristled at being told how to do his job, but another doctor in the crowd, Dr. Obi, a cardiologist from Lagos University Teaching Hospital, stepped forward. "Let me try," she said. "I have my equipment in my car." She returned moments later with her medical bag. The crowd had grown silent, everyone pressing closer to see. Dr. Obi bent over the casket with her stethoscope. She listened at Amara's chest for what seemed like an eternity. Then she moved the stethoscope to different positions. Her expression changed from skepticism to concentration, then to shock. "There's something," she whispered. "It's very faint, but there's something." The crowd erupted. Chaik pushed forward. "That's impossible." Dr. Obi held up her hand for silence. She gently opened one of Amara's eyelids and shone a pen light into it. Then she pressed gently on the eyeball. "Corneal reflex is present," she announced, her voice shaking. "Weak, but present. This woman is not dead. She's in some kind of extremely deep coma." The scene that followed was chaos. Cheshim to collapse in on himself, stumbling backward. Some people were crying, others praying, many shouting questions. An ambulance was called immediately. Dr. Nwachukwu was released by the security guards and fell to his knees, tears streaming down his weathered face. Within 15 minutes, Amara was loaded into an ambulance and rushed to the Lagos University Teaching Hospital with Dr. Obi and several other doctors in attendance. The funeral was abandoned, guests scattering in confusion and amazement. The story was already spreading across social media like wildfire. Billionaire who had almost been buried alive, saved by a homeless man. But this was only the beginning of the story. At the hospital, Amara was taken to the intensive care unit. A team of specialists worked to assess her condition and slowly bring her back to consciousness. It was a delicate process. Her body had been in this state for 3 days, and they had to be careful not to shock her system. Meanwhile, hospital administrators tracked down more information about Dr. Obinna Nwachukwu. What they discovered was heartbreaking. He had indeed been a respected neurologist 12 years ago, with a promising career ahead of him. But tragedy had struck when his wife and 2 children died in a car accident. He had been driving. Though the accident wasn't his fault, a drunk driver had run a red light. He had never forgiven himself. He had descended into depression and alcoholism, losing his medical license, his home, and eventually his grip on reality. For the past 8 years, he had been living on the streets of Lagos, his brilliant mind occasionally surfacing through the fog of trauma and substance abuse. But on that morning, sleeping rough behind the funeral home, something in his doctor's training had awakened when he saw that casket move. Some part of him that had never completely died recognized the signs of life where others saw only death. Father Benedict, the priest from the funeral, found Dr. Nwachukwu sitting on a bench outside the hospital. The doctor was still in his ragged clothes, looking lost and overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "Dr. Nwachukwu," Father Benedict said gently, sitting beside him. You saved a woman's life today. You should be proud." The homeless man shook his head. "I couldn't save my own family. I should have seen the car coming. I should have." "You couldn't have prevented that accident," the priest interrupted. "But today you prevented another tragedy. Perhaps God has been preparing you for this moment all along." Before Dr. Nwachukwu could respond, a commotion erupted at the hospital entrance. News crews had arrived. The story was now national news. The homeless doctor who had stopped a billionaire's funeral was being called a hero, though he felt anything but heroic. 3 days after being rushed to the hospital, Amara Okonkwo opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the white ceiling of the hospital room. Then faces came into focus. Doctors, nurses, and someone she didn't expect to see. A thin, elderly man with kind eyes sitting in the corner of her room. "Welcome back," Dr. Obi said, squeezing her hand gently. "You've been on quite a journey." Over the next few hours, as Amara's strength returned, they told her everything. How she had been declared dead. How her funeral had been organized. How a homeless man had stopped her from being buried alive. She listened in stunned silence, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I want to see him," she said finally. "I want to see the man who saved me." Dr. Nwachukwu was brought to her room. He had been cleaned up, given new clothes by the hospital staff, but he still looked uncomfortable, like a man who didn't belong in civilized spaces anymore. Amara looked at him for a long moment, then extended her hand. "You saved my life," she said simply. "How can I ever thank you?" He took her hand hesitantly. "I did what any doctor would do, what any human being should do." "But you're not just any human being," Amara said. "They told me about your background, about what you've been through." She paused, her voice strengthening. "I want to help you. Please let me help you." Over the following weeks, as Amara recovered, the full story of what had happened began to emerge. Medical experts confirmed that she had suffered from a rare condition called catalepsy, triggered by a severe reaction to medication she had been taking for anxiety. The condition had mimicked death so convincingly that even experienced doctors had been fooled. But there was another revelation, one that sent shockwaves through the Okonkwo family and Lagos's business community. Detectives investigating the case discovered that the medication Amara had been taking hadn't been prescribed by her regular doctor. It had been given to her by her brother, Chaik, who claimed it was a new supplement for stress relief. Further investigation revealed that Chaik had been embezzling millions from Okonkwo Industries for years, and he knew Amara was about to discover the theft. The medication was deliberately meant to induce a death-like state. Chaik had researched catalepsy and found a combination of drugs that could produce it. His plan had been perfect. His sister would appear to die of natural causes, he would take over the company, and her body would be buried before anyone could discover she was still alive. He hadn't counted on a homeless man sleeping behind the funeral home. He hadn't counted on Dr. Obinna Nwachukwu. Chike was arrested and eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder and embezzlement. The trial became one of the most sensational in Nigerian history. But the real story that captured the nation's heart was what happened afterward. Amara Okonkwo, true to her word, didn't just thank Dr. Nwachukwu and send him on his way. She took personal responsibility for his rehabilitation. She paid for him to enter one of the best treatment programs in the country for trauma and substance abuse. She hired therapists to help him work through his grief over his family's death. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and difficult days. But slowly, Dr. Nwachukwu began to heal. The brilliant mind that had been buried under years of pain and guilt began to reemerge. 18 months after the interrupted funeral, Dr. Obinna Nwachukwu stood before the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria. With Amara's support and advocacy, and with letters of recommendation from Dr. Obi and other doctors who had witnessed his diagnosis, he applied for reinstatement of his medical license. The council deliberated for hours. Dr. Nwachukwu's case was unprecedented, but in the end, they ruled in his favor. He would have to complete refresher courses and work under supervision for 2 years, but he could practice medicine again. The day he received his license back, Dr. Nwachukwu and Amara stood together at a press conference. "This man gave me back my life," Amara said, her voice strong and clear. "I'm honored to give him back his. But Amara didn't stop there. She had been profoundly changed by her experience, by coming so close to death, by the betrayal of her brother, and by being saved by someone society had dismissed as worthless. She used her wealth and influence to establish the Second Chances Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping homeless individuals who, like Dr. Nwachukwu, had fallen through society's cracks but still had potential to contribute. The foundation provided medical care, mental health services, job training, and housing assistance. Dr. Nwachukwu became the foundation's medical director. He specialized in treating other homeless individuals, bringing both his professional skills and his personal understanding of what they were going through. He understood their pain, their shame, their feeling of being invisible, and he knew that sometimes a second chance was all someone needed. 5 years later, on a bright Lagos morning, Dr. Obinna Nwachukwu arrived at the Second Chances Medical Clinic, a state-of-the-art facility that Amara had built in the heart of the city. He walked past a mural on the wall that showed a homeless man reaching up to touch a casket, a reminder of where their journey had begun. His day was full, as always. He saw dozens of patients, people living on the streets, people struggling with addiction, people who had lost everything and were trying to rebuild. Each person who came through the doors received not just medical care, but dignity, respect, and hope. In the afternoon, Amara visited the clinic, as she often did. She and Dr. Nwachukwu had become close friends, bound by the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked him as they stood in his office, looking out at the waiting room full of patients. "Every day," he admitted. "I think about how close we both came to the end. You to being buried alive. Me to dying forgotten on the street with my talents wasted. My brother wanted to bury me," Amara said quietly. "But in a way, I had already buried myself. I was so focused on making money, on building my empire, that I'd forgotten why I was doing it. I'd forgotten to actually live." She turned to look at him. "You didn't just save my life that day, Obinna. You showed me what it really means to be alive, to use what you have to help others, to see value in people that society overlooks, to believe in second chances." Dr. Nwachukwu smiled, the deep lines in his face softening. "And you gave me back my purpose. You gave me back myself." Through the window, they could see the clinic staff working with patients, doctors, nurses, social workers, counselors. Many of them were people who had themselves been homeless or in crisis before finding help through the Second Chances Foundation. They understood their patients because they had walked the same path. "You know," Amara said, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been sleeping in that alley that morning. If you hadn't seen the casket move, if you hadn't had the courage to speak up even though you knew everyone would think you were crazy." "Don't think about that," Dr. Nwachukwu said firmly. "I learned a long time ago that we can't live in the what-ifs. We can only live in the what is and the what will be." A young nurse knocked on the door. "Dr. Nwachukwu, there's someone here asking for you. He says his name is Joseph. He's been living on the streets for 3 years and heard you might be able to help him." Dr. Nwachukwu exchanged a glance with Amara, then nodded. "Send him in. Let's see how we can help." As he walked to meet the new patient, Amara watched him go. She thought about how far they had both come, from a casket and a street corner to this place of healing and hope. She thought about how one moment of courage, one refusal to stay silent, had changed everything. The story of the homeless man who stopped a billionaire's funeral had become legend in Lagos, told and retold, growing more dramatic with each telling. But the real story, Amara knew, was quieter and more profound. It was about two broken people who had saved each other. It was about how sometimes the people society dismisses as having nothing to offer are the very ones who can offer everything. It was about second chances and how they can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. Epilogue. 10 years after the interrupted funeral, Amara Okonkwo stood at a podium in front of the United Nations General Assembly. She had been invited to speak about her foundation's work and its success in helping homeless and marginalized people across Africa. "I died once," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Or at least everyone thought I did. I was minutes away from being buried alive when a man everyone had dismissed as crazy, as worthless, as invisible, saved my life. That man had lost everything: his family, his career, his home, his dignity. Society had given up on him. But he never gave up on his own humanity. When he saw someone in danger, he acted, despite knowing no one would believe him. She paused, letting her words sink in. Dr. Obinna Nwachukwu taught me that every person has value, no matter how far they've fallen. Our foundation has helped over 10,000 people in the past decade. Former homeless individuals are now doctors, teachers, engineers, artists, business owners. They contribute billions to our economy. They raise families. They save lives. They were always valuable. They just needed someone to believe in them. In the audience, Dr. Nwachukwu sat next to his new wife, a counselor he had met at the foundation. They held hands as they listened to Amara speak. He thought about his first wife and children, gone but never forgotten. He thought about the dark years on the street. And he thought about that morning, 10 years ago, when something had compelled him to speak up, to insist on the impossible, to refuse to be silent. We are all one tragedy away from losing everything, Amara continued. And we are all one act of courage away from saving someone's life. My brother tried to bury me, but a homeless man who had every reason to give up on humanity instead chose to fight for it. That's the lesson I want to share with the world. Never underestimate the power of one person who refuses to walk by. Never dismiss someone who society has forgotten. Because any one of us could be in that casket. And any one of us could be the person brave enough to say, "Stop, something's wrong here." When she finished speaking, the assembly rose in a standing ovation. But Amara wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Dr. Nwachukwu, who was wiping tears from his eyes. He nodded at her, and she nodded back, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared, the lives they had touched, and the truth they had learned together. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving themselves. And sometimes, being willing to save just one person changes the whole world. The woman who was almost buried alive and the homeless man who saved her had both found what they were looking for: purpose, redemption, and proof that it's never too late for a second chance.